Coming up next is Dr. Kimberly Taylor. Here's your chance to talk about what matters to you. Although you will receive helpful advice from Dr. Taylor, remember, this is not to be construed as a form of psychotherapy, diagnosis, or treatment, and cannot replace a therapeutic relationship with a mental health professional. You can reach Dr. Taylor by calling 564-1290 or toll free at 866-564-1290. You can also listen live on the internet at drkimtaylorshow.com. So here now is Dr. Kimberly Taylor.
Different months have different awareness campaigns associated with them, and September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And as much as people have difficulty talking about it, suicide is a topic worth covering, as over 3,000 people die every day by suicide. The statistics show us that this is more than all deaths of children and adults caused by accidents, wars, and homicides combined. And this works out that every 40 seconds, someone dies by suicide. And in a lot of the cases, it may have been preventable. There are those who say that there are always signs, that there is desperate cries for help, and that we should be able to recognize these signs when they appear in our loved ones. I think what is probably more true is that while there are signs of depression and despair, it's often hard to recognize when or if someone will take that final step and end their own life. So it is certainly shocking when someone like Robin Williams falls to this tragedy. And we are often left to ask, why? Why would a person with so much of what most people seem to want choose to end his own life? From the outside, it would appear that he had all kinds of reasons to live, with people who loved him and admired him, and with a future full of hope and promise. And yet, this was the answer to the problems that he felt. And if this can happen to him, doesn't that make us all vulnerable too? Suicide has always been a subject that most people don't want to talk about because it's been viewed as a shameful way to die. And then for the families and friends that are left behind, they're often left to deal with the stigma associated with ending one's own life. So that this means that even after the passing of a loved one, they are kept in silence to deal with their own pain and possible guilt. But we have to be able to bring it to the light and have a conversation about suicide to help not only those who are considering this option, but for those who are concerned that their loved ones are also at risk. So with that in mind, today my guest is Dr. Mark GOULSTON. He has been a suicide specialist for over 30 years. He's also the author of a number of books, including Getting Out of Your Own Way. He is a returning guest to this program, and today I'm very pleased to have him with us as we are going to be talking about suicide. So I will be right back after the break with Dr. Mark GOULSTON. I'm Kimberly Taylor, and you're listening to KZSB AM 1290.
You are listening to Dr. Kimberly Taylor. You can reach her by calling 564-1290 or toll free at 866-564-1290.
We are talking about suicide. It is the month where it is the National Prevention Awareness Month about this issue. And we are here talking with Dr. Mark GOULSTON, which I'd like to welcome to the program.
Thank you, Kim.
Yes. Now, you have been a suicide specialist for more than 30 years. You, though, are also a psychiatrist, business consultant, coach. You're an author of a few books here. One of them, Get Out of Your Own Way, or Get Out of Your Own Way at Work, and Just Listen. So you've had a lot of experience working with people, and we were all, I'm sure, very shocked and saddened by hearing about Robin Williams. Here is someone who we all thought probably has so much and has access to probably the best of care. So the question keeps coming up, why would he choose to end his life through suicide?
There's millions of people who are depressed, hundreds of millions of people who are depressed, and not all of them kill themselves. I would imagine that a number of them feel they'd be better off dead. Interestingly, years ago, one of the famous psychiatrists of the last century, Karl Menninger, was also a specialist in suicide, and one of the things that he said is that part of suicidal thinking is the wish to kill, the wish to be killed, and the wish to die. And those are all very different. When I talk around the country on suicide, and one of the things that I often talk about is despair, because I believe that nearly all people who are feeling suicidal at the moment of suicide, they feel what I call unpaired, or DES/PAIR. So when they look out at the world, or they feel themselves, they feel unpaired with hope. They feel hopeless, unpaired with worth. They feel worthless, unpaired with any help that could help them, helpless. And the list goes on, unpaired with a point to go on, pointless, meaningless, useless. And so when they're feeling all of those, if they feel all of those at the same time, they start to pair with death as a way out. And something that I would ask listeners to consider, I would imagine that a number of people who have had amazingly awful physical pain, like I've had the misfortune of having a kidney stone a couple times, and I can tell you, when you're in the middle of that pain, you want the pain to go away, but when there's no escape from it, you actually start feeling, just, if you can't take the pain away, just kill me. Mm-hmm. And so if you can imagine that there's a psychological or psychic equivalent to that, and that it's unrelenting. And as you said, one of the problems is it's invisible. And so there is a great deal of shame at not being able to point to it, not being able to give a reason for it. So often shame enters into the picture. And so I can't say exactly what Robin Williams felt at the moment just before he did it, but in most of the cases of people I've worked with who had made attempts and lived, they did feel despair, at the end.
So this is really a way to get out of the suffering they feel, and that sense that nothing is ever going to change.
Absolutely. It's interesting. You bring up something. This is a slight tangent, but maybe your listeners will find this of some interest. When you bring up a feeling that nothing will ever change, one of the greatest problems, aside from suicide, is in many of our youth, is motivating them to do things that are good for them. And when some of our teenagers or even our young adults feel that nothing that they do is ever going to change the fact that they are destined to be unhappy, that they are destined to be alone and lonely, there's a negative feedback loop, and so they end up doing nothing. Because even if it's a small thing, they'll say, that's not going to do anything to change the fact that I believe, that I am destined to be unhappy, or I'm destined to be just have a lousy life. And so I think that's kind of what happens, is that when you get cemented on this view that no matter what I do, no matter what anyone does, it's not going to change the fact that to me, this pain won't go away and my life isn't worth living, it then shuts down people's efforts to do anything.
Mm-hmm. And when you talk about this loss of a connection, you're talking about the loss of a connection to hope and to help, but also to others. Is it that there is the beginning of feeling like that they're never going to be understood, or they can't explain this to someone, or they can't admit it to someone also because of some of the shame?
I think there's all those things. There's actually there's a case of one of my most suicidal patients from years ago, and actually I think because of her, I wrote the book Just Listen, even though it's not just about her. But because of an experience I had with her, I went into the suicidal soul, And what had happened is I was moonlighting at a state hospital. This was in the early 80s. And so I hadn't slept for about 36 hours. And when you don't sleep for 36 hours, your mind plays tricks on you.
Mm-hmm.
And your teeth shake, and other parts of your body don't seem to function well, and you're a little bit wiggy. And so I'd been seeing this woman who had made 4 suicide attempts over the previous 5 years and had been hospitalized 3 months every year prior to my seeing her, and I didn't think I was helping her. I mean, and yet I'd seen her for about, I think, 8 months, and that's the longest she'd gone without a suicide attempt or being hospitalized, and I didn't think I was doing anything because she didn't say anything. She wasn't catatonic, but when she would come in, she'd come in on time, and, she would occasionally give one-word answers, and she would never look me in the eye. And so when she came into my office and I hadn't slept for 36 hours, an odd thing happened. There she was, looking 30 degrees to the left, just sort of staring. And suddenly all the color in the room turned to black and white. As I'm looking at it, I'm saying, this is odd. And then the black and white all melted, and it started to get really dark and gray and really, really ugly. And I thought I was having a seizure or a stroke. And so I did a neurologic exam on myself, and it wasn't rude because she wasn't looking at me anyway. So I'm tapping my knees, I'm tapping my elbows, I have a finger in front of my eyes, and I said, well, geez, I'm all here. I'm not having a stroke or a seizure. And then I had this crazy idea that I was looking at the world through her eyes. And I didn't know how it happened, but I was very intrigued and, curious, and so I leaned into it. I just leaned into whatever that felt like. And it got worse and worse and worse. And when I've told this to other people, they have told me, oh, you entered the dark night of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I refer to it as. And there was a point at which it was so horrible. And I don't even think I was thinking clearly about hopeless, helpless, worthless. It was indescribable. And so since I was sleep deprived, I blurted out something that normally I wouldn't. And I said, Nancy, I didn't know it was so bad. And I can't help you kill yourself. But if you do, I will still think well of you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll miss you. And maybe I'll understand why you had to. And then I thought to myself, don't put that in the medical record.
Yeah, you just gave her
that was it.
Permission,
I thought,
right?
I said, did I think that or did I say that? I said it. I'm in deep doo-doo here. And so, and then she looked at me. It was the first time she looked at me, and she made this amazing eye contact. And when she looked into my eyes and I looked into her eyes, I realized I had it right. In some way, I had seen the world through her eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to her, because I thought she was definitely going to say, thank you for letting me do it. Because that was the longest she'd gone without an attempt. And I said, what are you thinking? And she looked at me, and she said, she not only looked at me, she looked into me. She said, if you can really understand why I might have to kill myself, maybe I won't need to.
That gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, and then the room came back, the color came back, and she came back. She went and got a PhD. But I think it changed everything. What I realized is it's almost like when I could feel her suicidality, that I couldn't bear it. And in fact, I thought she was stronger than me, because if I was feeling this 7 days a week, I would have already done it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I could validate that and not judge it, she was able to give it to me. And when she gave it to me, in other words, she paired with me. And when she paired with me, I think it enabled her to pair away from death. Something else I've done in my professional career is I've trained FBI and police hostage negotiators. And when I've trained them, it's always been to, try to have a conversation in which you're connecting with the hostage taker. And this wouldn't work necessarily with a terrorist or anything like that,
mm-hmm.
but if it's someone who's doing it because they're emotionally distraught or something awful's happened in their life, then this could be highly effective. And the point is, when the person could really feel that you not only understood where they were coming from, but you could feel them, so they feel felt, their agitation would lessen. And instead of pairing with the gun as a way out, they would pair with you. They would lean into the conversation with you.
Mm-hmm. So it's almost as if also saying that they need to keep up their despair until they are finally heard.
Yeah, I don't think it's a matter of they're trying it. I think that's what they're left with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have a big, huge mission in life, which if you'll join me or help me with it, I think I'd have you at hello. But my big mission in life is to heal the world one conversation at a time. Mm-hmm. Because I think I know what talking with another person looks like, feels like, how to do it. And talking with another person, which is what I did with Nancy, is different than talking at, over, or even to people.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is when you talk with another person, the person leans towards you and you lean towards them, and it builds community. And I've done some workshops on this, and a lot of people are a little puzzled by it. And if I were to ask you, Kim, if you could think of a mentor or a parent or a grandparent or a teacher who had a conversation with you when you were going through a tough time, a dark time, or time, when you didn't know if you could do something, just recalling that conversation, I'm willing to bet that you felt they talked with you.
Absolutely, and that they absolutely got where I was at and said the words that I needed to hear, and was just really in tuned.
Right, and
Yes.
And it changed your life. In a lot of cases, it saves people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
So my view is, imagine right now. That's why this is a crazy mission. But anyone want to join me? They can come to Heartfelt Leadership. By the way, that's kind of what we're about. But imagine all the people in the world right now that are talking at or over each other. And if we could turn a switch and they suddenly started talking with each other, the world as we know it would change.
It would change dramatically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so what happens, I think, in the suicidal mind is there's no one talking with you, and then what happens is your mind starts talking with you, and your mind at that point is not your friend.
Mm-hmm. Well, we are going to talk more about that, and I love the concept about healing the world one conversation at a time, and we're going to be right back to do that right after the break. I'm Kimberly Taylor, and you're listening to KZSB AM 1290.
You are listening to Dr. Kimberly Taylor. You can reach her by calling 564-1290 or toll-free at 866-564-1290.
I'm here with Dr. Mark GOULSTON, and he is a psychiatrist, business consultant, coach. You have done a lot of things. You're an author. You are a former FBI and police hostage trainer, as well as working in the field of suicide. And that's what we're trying to talk about today, is that you, having been in this field for over 30 years, people are probably going to want to know that, is there anything that they can do, and what is it that they need to do if they feel like a loved one is at that point?
Well, if we have a little time, actually, I'm going to read something. There's a blog that I wrote for the Huffington Post, and it's called "What Your Teenager Wants You to Know But Won't Tell You," and there's a letter in there. It's actually a composite of several letters, but I think it really expresses what's going on inside their mind. And I bring it up because if people would just look up GOULSTON and "What Your Teenager Wants You to Know," they'll find this. So can I take a minute or two and just read this? Okay. Given all the things I'm doing that have disappointed you, I'm hoping you won't just see this as another excuse or a way of manipulating you, both of which I'm very capable of doing, and during other times have even been a master at. In fact, I've been so good at doing both of these, I'm afraid to tell you what I'm about to and have you think I'm just being dramatic and only trying to get attention or get out of taking responsibility for my actions and paying the consequences for them. Today I have a little bigger fish to fry. I'm losing it. I'm losing my mind, my sense of who I am, of where I belong, and I'm spending more and more time wondering if life is worth living. I know I don't have any reason to feel like ending it. I know that so many people have it worse than me. I even know that I have all the reasons to live. I just don't feel any of them. I have felt alone for some time now. It hasn't been for a few days or even a few weeks. It's been at least months. Also, the intensity of rage that I feel not only chills you, which I know is why you back off when it gets really ugly between us, it chills and frightens me. I hate hating you even more than I hate you. When I hate you at the level I'm capable of hating you, I feel like destroying things. That has escalated and finally shifted to just thinking of destroying me. But in reality, I don't want to destroy anything. I just want to destroy how bad I feel and make it go away, but it won't go away. And I can't make it go away. The reasons I drink, do drugs, cut on myself, all of which scare the crap out of you, are because they all relieve me. When I'm stone cold sober and drug-free and the pain and the craziness intensifies, all I can think about is numbing myself. I don't do alcohol and drugs to get high. I just do them to get by. And when I cut on myself, which terrorizes you, I feel like I'm cutting out the pain, or at the very least that I'm feeling something. And feeling something gives me relief from the pain of feeling absolutely nothing. Assuming you won't rub my face in this, which might actually wake me up or push me over the edge, but I don't think you want to play Russian roulette with me, you'll probably ask me what you can do to help. And I wish I had an answer to tell you. Actually, the answer I'd like to tell you, I am telling you by giving you this message and hoping you'll just listen to it. I think the hole in my being and the missingness at my core needs warmth from you, Mom. Occasional kindness from pathetic, rational, lecturing, clueless Dad is just not the same. And I think I can't get that warmth from you because all of us, including Dad, fight you, or because you no longer have any warmth, either because you didn't get it from Grandma or because it got worn out by all of us. Dad, you're not off the hook in this. I think you run interference between Mom and me, and you try to keep the peace, and then I think you find your home away from home when you go to work or travel for work or you go play sports with your buddies. Maybe a start would be if I saw each of you making the effort to understand me, especially when you have no chance of actually doing it. There is a good chance that neither of you will be able to understand me because I am as different from you as you are from each other. But it might help if I saw you continuing to try and continuing to ask or say things like this to me. Tell me what's happening and how you feel it in another way, because I see that I'm not getting it and I want to get it. And tell me at its worst what that's like. And if I push you away, you might do well to stand firm and say, we can't go away because as your parents, we can't allow you to feel so alone in hell, and we've got to do whatever we can to get you out. So we're sorry to tick you off, but it's in the parents' rule book, which you'll find out when you become one. One of my friend's parents actually sleeps outside a room on the floor, which my friend both resents and feels safer with. More importantly, I think it might help if I saw you not getting so frustrated and throwing your hands up because I keep pushing back and won't agree to what you think should make me feel better. Going along with it to get you off my back hasn't worked and actually makes me feel worse. I think I can live with the pain, I just can't live with the suffering. I think the suffering happens when I feel all alone in my pain for a long period of time and it just won't leave me alone. I think if I could feel less alone from the inside out, I could listen to what you and the world are telling me from the outside in. Feeling alone is feeling that I am unpaired with what everyone else seems to have. Other people seem to have hope, and I'm hopeless. Other people seem to be able to find help, and I feel helpless. Other people seem to have a reason to go on, and I just think everything's pointless and meaningless. And feeling unpaired with all of those things causes me to feel despair. I feel like I'm trapped in a dark, cold mine shaft. And I've run out of food and water, and I'm running out of oxygen, and I'm running out of time. I keep hearing people digging to find me. I hear them thinking they've found me, and they're all excited. But what I know that they don't know is that they're digging in the wrong direction, because one of them got a glimpse of a doll in a different mine shaft that I left there many years ago, and everyone thinks it's me. That might give you some idea.
Yes. What this reminds me of is sometimes the best thing that we can do is just be present in someone else's pain. We don't have to necessarily have the words or the answers.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I recently discovered a new charter school in West Los Angeles. It's called the City Charter School, and I'm fascinated with it. I'm going to do a parents program there in a couple weeks. It started with a 6th grade, and then when the 6th grade went on, it added a 7th grade, and now I think it's in its 3rd year, so it has a 6th, a 7th, and an 8th grade. And Sherry Werner, who's the head of it, she's a remarkable person, and it's a public school, and I think there's a waiting list of 800 people to get into the 180 slots. And what she does is it's all about having people have conversations with each other all the time. So there's no bullying, and whenever someone starts to act up, it gets talked through. Mm-hmm. The parents are on board. The teachers are all excited about it. And what I love about it is they're growing it organically. So it's not already some big school that's set in its ways, and then they're trying to spackle on some things that might help with stress. So I'm just so excited about it. And I've told them that any way that I can assist, especially in some of those conversations that are happening, I want in on. But if you look up City Charter School, you'll find out something about it. And, well, I would love things like this to be starting all over the place.
Well, and just as you read this, all that young person was saying, most young people don't have the words. They don't know how to say all of that. They actually do need others to help them to find those words. So whether it's sometimes coming into a therapist's office, whether it's sometimes having other people sit down like you're talking about in this school, and just opening up the conversation over and over and over again so that people are talking more rather than feeling what they're feeling, but then not finding a voice. So I like that concept. We have to take one more break. I will be right back with Dr. Mark Goulston right after the break. I'm Kimberly Taylor, and you're listening to KZSB AM 1290.
You are listening to Dr. Kimberly Taylor. You can reach her by calling 564-1290 or toll-free at 866-564-1290.
I'm here with Dr. Mark Goulston, and we're talking about a suicide, but we're also talking about how to open up the conversation with people who have reached such a state of despair that they are very hard to actually reach. Mark, you had talked about in your book, Just Listen, that there is something that people can do to really make somebody feel felt. So how do we go about making someone feel like you really understand them or you really get what it is that is going on with them? Are there things that we can do to help those?
Well, there's some actual practical, tactical tips in Just Listen that help you to have better conversations. One of the tips is something that I call fill in the blanks. And what that means is when you ask someone a question, it's oppositional. I mean, even if it's a positive question, it tends to trigger in people flashbacks of being put on the spot by questions all their life. So how fill in the blanks works, and tell me if you can sense the difference in this, Kim. So, so if you were to ask your child, what are you worried about? That's a perfectly good question. They might answer it, but see how it feels different if you say, what you're most worried about is, and then you invite them with your hand into the sentence. it's kind of like asking someone, let's see, what do you want to study in school, versus what you want to study in school is, and when you add it as a fill in the blanks, you're inviting them into a sentence with you.
Right, because the first one felt that it was more of an attack or a test. It was either going to be the right answer or the wrong answer, so it would set somebody else up to be a little more defensive, where the second one that you're talking about is really to want to know and be interested, and therefore to invite them in.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Something else that I suggest, especially with teenagers and young adults, teenagers can't stand these heart-to-heart talks unless they initiate them. And so one of the things that I suggest to parents is when you're doing an activity together, as in when you're driving or whatever, to start posing some hypothetical questions, such as, if you were to say to a friend, one of your kids, going forward, the person, and I'll use the first fill in the blanks, going forward, the person you think who's going to get into the most trouble this year is, and then you don't act judgmental, and they give you the person's name, and the reason you think they're going to get into trouble is because, and what's happening is your kid's giving you a sense of, you're planting the seeds for judgment. And another question you might, or fill in the blanks thing you might say is, a class that you can study for at the last minute and get away with would be, and a class that you really have to stay up to date with or else you're going to fall behind would be. And so what you're eliciting from them is a sense of judgment and planning and things like that. And then if you want to start getting into more of the emotional things, you might say something, the times when you feel worst or most frustrated are blah, 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 blah. And so what you're doing is you're inviting them, but you're tapping into their brain, and you're seeding, different kinds of things. So I don't know if that makes sense. Also, something that I talk about in Just Listen is something called FTD delivery, and I don't mean flowers. I'm very shy. I mean, if you take me to a party, I used to stare at the chip dip, and then I'm forcing myself to be okay on this show, Kim. But and I remember I used to ruin my wife's time, and so one time I said to myself, I'm going to go to this thing, and I'm going to not be a pain in the rear. I'm going to have a good time, and I'm going to speak to 3 people, and they're going to be glad they spoke to me. And by the end of the evening, I'd spoken to 5 people, and 3 of them, when we finished talking, they shook my hand with 2 hands. They looked me in the eye, and they said, it was really good meeting you. And then afterwards, I thought to myself, what the heck did I do? And what I realized is in the conversation, I asked the person about what they felt about something, what they thought about something, and what they did about something. So that's FTD. Because when you can get another person to say how they feel about something, and you could talk about a sport, you could talk about, what do you feel about Joan? What do you feel about Robin Williams dying? And then what did you think about that? Geez, if you were down and at your wit's end, what would you do? And so by drawing out of another person what they feel, what they think, and what they do, they really feel understood by you. And I think that's what I did, is in those conversations, it's like I was going back and forth, eliciting from other people their feelings, thoughts, and what they would do. And I think what happened is it caused them to feel known by me and understood.
Mm-hmm. So we're talking about making very close connections in a very easy way, but it does make people feel like you care, that they matter, and this alone will cause that a connection and that bond so that people are not feeling so alone all the time. But I think we also need to talk about, when do people really need to get help?
Well, I think when people are getting very depressed and heading towards suicidal thoughts, it's if you notice a change in their behavior, it's pretty noticeable. One of my mentors had this great phrase, which was, try to be a good noticer in life. He said, noticing is different than looking, watching, and seeing. When you notice something, you're really focused on it. So if there's people you're worried about, notice how they're spending their time. Are they spending it more alone? Are they, when you're with them, are they talking less? Are they more negative? Are they stopping seeing friends? And I think if you see those things, you'll begin to notice them. Something you can also say, 'cause then the next step is, so what do you say? And what you can bring up to them is, I remember one parent said to her teenager, as your parent, I can't allow you to be alone and feeling how bad you feel. And I don't need your permission to step in and try and help you feel less alone. And it's kind of like that poem we read. And if you ever become a parent, that's kind of what we do. And so a lot of times we're afraid, they'll push back, or they'll say, get off my back. And a lot of times, even if that person you're worried about does push back, they may not want you around, but that doesn't mean they don't need you to be around. I think the key is to not take it personally when their depression or their despair is talking at you, and then just to be patiently present.
I think people often feel that they need to help people who are considering a suicide to have a reason to live, to connect to something, as just a way to extend their life and to make them feel like they have a life worth living. Is that something that people can do for others?
Well, there's something you can do. There's on the power of an unsolicited apology. And there are a number of people in this world who have never received an unsolicited apology from anyone in their life. And so it is one of the most disarming things you can do, even with someone who's feeling this way. And so if there is someone who's feeling that way, this is the steps of an unsolicited apology. You say to them, when might we take a few minutes, because I think I owe you an apology for something. Now, most people are going to be intrigued just to find out what the heck is this about. Even if they're down, they're going to be intrigued. And then, so that's the first step, is you get them to agree to it. The next step is to say, we've talked about a bunch of things, and you bring up certain things where there seems to be this conflict, and you say, and wouldn't you agree that we have a different point of view? And they'll say, yes. That's the second step. The third step is, well, I want to apologize because I don't think I've really made an effort or taken the time to understand how you came to think the way you do. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to apologize for that. And the fourth step is, and there's something else I want to apologize for that I'm embarrassed about. To be honest, I didn't want to understand. I just, wanted to, move things ahead or
be right,
make things better or be right. Mm-hmm. And I'm embarrassed about that. I didn't even want to understand your point of view. And then the final step is, if you give me a chance, I'd like to fix that now. And if you will tell me how you came to where you are now and how you're thinking and feeling, I will listen. I will do everything I can to understand it without one word of advice.
Mm-hmm. I think that for a lot of people that all of these tips would be really great, and that if they could get into the mode of even moving past their own fear, because when somebody is suicidal or in this state of despair and feeling helpless or hopeless, human nature is to want to move away from that because people are afraid to kind of move into that. And oftentimes what can happen is that person will then feel even more alone. And when they do commit suicide, then the friends and family are left to feel very guilty. Is it ever the family's fault? I mean, how do you resolve the guilt that you would feel by thinking that you didn't do enough?
First of all, realize that almost everyone, the survivors after someone commits suicide, thinks they didn't do enough. They, so you're normal to feel, oh my God, I didn't do enough. Oh, I came up with excuses and things like that. I should have done a better job. I was more patient. And so realize that everyone who's unfortunately had someone in their family die feels that way. One of the things that I do suggest to people is to go to groups of people going through the same thing, because because if you talk to someone and they're understanding and they haven't had a family member who committed suicide, no matter what they say, you're going to be thinking, well, that's easy for you to say, it didn't happen to you. And so there are groups that you can go to, and it won't be so easy to discount what those other people say, because those people have gone through the same thing. That's why there were, I don't know if they still have them, but there used to be something called Reach for Recovery, which were groups for women who've had mastectomies, because, when people just felt that was awful and disfiguring, they felt no one could understand them unless it happened to them. So I think, and you can, turn to your church, your synagogue, or local mental health to find such resources. But that's where I would go to, is with other people who have experienced the same sad thing.
Mm-hmm. I would like to thank you very much for coming on. I think this is a very hard topic to talk about. I think for people who perhaps have gone through this with loved ones, and or for anybody who has thought about it, that it is a hard topic to talk about and to feel the feelings surrounding this. But I really like what you said about having one conversation at a time as a way to try and heal the world and to perhaps change the world. So I want to thank you very much for being with us again. I am going to be putting all of your contact info on my website. Thank you very much. We're going to be taking our last break here, and I'll be back with a few final thoughts. I'm Kimberly Taylor, and you're listening to KZSB AM 1290. We will likely know someone in our lifetime that is at risk for a suicide. So I hope by having this kind of open conversation that people will feel more comfortable talking about this and being able to help yourself as well as to help others. I want to thank you for being here. If you would like to hear this program again, you can go to my website at drkimtaylorshow.com. Or you can go to iTunes and download the podcast there. I will certainly have all of the information up on my website about Dr. Mark Goulston for you to also have. So I hope that you join me live here next Thursday afternoon between 2 and 3. And I also want to let you know that as of September 25th, we're going to be having a new time. And I am going to be here at 5 o'clock on Thursdays during your drive time. So you have drive time with Dr. Kim. So go out and make it a great day, and don't forget, nobody else has to change in order for you to get better.